Hello, this is the Arturia DrumBrute. Oh yes, Arturia made an analog drum machine. It contains 17 analog voices which are available simultaneously. We have tone controls for all of these drum sounds which are synthesized with circuits inside, and we can push and pull them into different places. We have full-size controls, we have a full sequencer which can go up to 64 steps, and we have a number of performance elements like the randomness and the looper and mutes and solos so that we can play DrumBrute live. The idea is that you can use this in the studio, but you are absolutely supposed to also be using this live. It's very flexible and it's grown up. I guess that's the sort of obvious thing when you look at it, but I mean, look at it. It's a complete drum machine. It's not a baby thing, it's a big thing. And so we can, you can get really hands-on and it's a lot of fun. Sonically, it's really exciting having all of these voices available, I'd say. There's a lot of kind of tribal elements that you can get that work really well for techno. And like with all of these things, if you process and compress them and squish them and smash them around, it just hugely expands the palette. It's what you do with any drum machine samples that you play around with. In this instance, you've actually got access to the raw sound making engine. So you can push and pull the voices around enormously just from the front panel, but using these external outputs, you can push them even further, and we'll play around with some external effects in a bit. So a ton of features in a thing that is full-sized, and the price is pretty ridiculous when you consider what it actually is. And also, very cool thing, we can sequence polyrhythmically. So every single lane of sequencing can have different step lengths at the same time. So you can have these hugely complex polyrhythmic drum patterns and loads more good stuff. So let's play. The way that it works, did you see that I just entered some notes because I had record active? We have two different ways of working. We have these little pads down here. These pads are velocity sensitive. They actually will send complete and full velocity information from 0 to 127 from the pads via MIDI and USB. To the internal engine though, each of the voices does have a velocity parameter, but it's two-stage. You can determine where the crossover happens, but for every element it has a kind of what's called a step strength and an accent strength. Accent, when you see it on here, is not what you would think of as accent on other machines. It isn't an accent for the entirety of every sound playing on that beat. It means for that one sound, it makes that one accent slightly, or one beat slightly stronger. So, for example, if I erase the closed hi-hat, like that, and then I have the blue step highlighted, I can enter notes with the blue step, strength. However, if I press accent, did you hear how that one is a bit louder? Oh yeah. So if I then want to extend the sequence and do more stuff, we can in a load of different ways. Probably the most simple and obvious way is if we hold Shift, and then I do that. And it's going to shift and copy the pattern, which was originally 16 step, onto 32 steps. Oh yeah. Now you'll hear that the closed hat, which is, or the snare even, was set to a randomness degree, and you can hear it trilling. The reason it's doing that is that there's actually a way that we can make things trill. So if I hold this down, there's two different things that I can do to every step. I can do this. You hear that? It suddenly trills. So I can do little flams by holding the step and adjusting the step repeat. Now, the step repeat is a looping effect. Which is really fun to toggle on and off. And when you release it, the sequencer has been carrying on in the background and will release and be where you left, or where you would have been if you never touched it. Let's build a pattern from scratch. So we, by the way, have banks, 4 banks, A, B, C, D, each which can have 16 patterns built in. We also have a song mode that allows us to chain patterns together. So even though we have 64 steps, you can have much longer gestalt sequences, build entire arrangements in here if you wish. So let's put in a kind of trad techno. And then let's go to maracas, and we'll be step strength, I think. Then what I'm going to do is put this in polyrhythm mode. So if I hold Shift, you see that this is not selected. If I push that, then polyrhythm is selected. And that means that when I use the last step function, which is similar to what's on the BeatStep Pro, that's where you can choose where the last step in the whole sequence is. If I do that with polyrhythm on, it's going to just choose the last step for only that sound. So the last step for here, I can make 7. So do you see that this is looping? So this means my snare has only got 7 beats in it. Reverse cymbal? Why not? And then we can mute elements live. So we can use this as I'm doing. If in a live situation you're sort of muting things just to like create a breakdown and then clear, then we can see what we're doing again. And then once again we can erase an element. So take out our 909-y kick, and then let's make this more kind of electro-y. See where it takes us. So this, yes please. Yeah. And that's infinitely half of the fun of a real analog drum machine, is the physical experience of messing around and performing these elements. It's so ridiculously good. And in a live situation, it's everything. Ooh. So fun. Like that. Pretty sweet. Let's play more. So I just so happen to have a mixer next to me, which I've got channels set up on. And we're going to use the individual outs and start processing elements individually. I've got a reverb and a delay unit from Eventide. And this is really fun. This is how in a live situation, you can be affecting different elements as part of the performance. And in a studio situation, it will allow you to track all those elements individually so that you'll end up with all of your elements split and you can process them accordingly. Now, it's 3.5mm outputs on the back of this thing. And fortuitously, the way it's designed, when you plug a cable into them, it takes them out of the main mix. And so what I've done here is take the clap out. Now the clap is on a fader on my mixer. So I can the other thing I can do is tap the hats. There's a combined output for the hats, and everything's clearly labeled, which is very helpful. So even sat over here, I know that the back one is the hat. So just like that. You see? And as everyone knows or should know, we're not used to hearing like the classic drum machines on their own. I think that's fair to say. So it's always nice. It's so interesting how you can push and pull drum machine sounds by distorting and compressing and stretching them, kicking their asses, as it were. You can really extend the palette beyond what is already a kind of a ludicrously broad palette, and that covers a load of different styles and classics. What else do we have? So put polyrhythm on. And let's change the step amount for that. So the low conga has a different. Hopefully you're starting to see how fun it is to link this up to a couple of effects, and kind of mixer, and you can do this in your DAW if you recorded all the elements separately. But there is a lot to be said for the immediacy. Ace. That's good, isn't it? Meet my friend the microbrute, synced via analog pulse to the drum machine. Like that, so let's have a 2-bar. Randomness. It's just a slinky little bugger. Bass. Pretty wicked having these two together with the effects, I would say. I'm just quietly having a good time. So that is the DrumBrute. I hope you've got a sense of the kinds of places that you can push this thing to. It's really hard for me to demo it for you because the DrumBrute, you know, the rhythms that are possible in this are infinite, and obviously the voices themselves, not only can you push them enormously on the panel to a huge amount of different places and use them with one another to create what feel like completely different drum machines, there is just an ocean to be explored by processing these drums in interesting ways. But what I can tell you, if it wasn't obvious enough already, is it is ridiculous how fun it is to mess around with this thing. And also, I can tell you that having this amount of voices available to you is awesome. It's so nice to have things like the toms and the congas as well, and to have this interesting character, which I know will blend beautifully with classic drum machines that we know and love and what this are partly inspired by, but what this is not exactly like, and that's what's interesting about it. This machine is its own thing. It isn't quite what it is inspired by, and that's awesome. And for the price, it's insane. It's blatantly insane that you can get this for what this costs, because this hasn't existed up to this point. For any kind of low cost, what we would consider low cost drum machine, huge compromises have had to be made in order to make them affordable. But for the very first time, we have a drum machine that is in every sense a grown-up drum machine, both in stature and certainly in terms of sound. That's not to say that the little devices do not sound amazing, because they do, and they are. But there is a lot to be said for having a large-scale physical interface to play with live, and all of these direct outs. So it's insane that this exists. I am so happy that it exists, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. So check it out for yourself. But don't hang around, right? Thanks.